Happy to be with you here today talking with regard to PeopleSoft database security. This presentation was actually offered at Collaborate about a month ago exactly. So the presentation is, as far as the slide count, is much longer than the time we have afforded here, but I wanted to keep the deck together because when we do send out a copy of this, I wanted to share that with everyone as far as the research that was put in and the message that was laid out. There is up on our website, and we'll probably send it out in accompanying along with the copy of the deck here, a one-page, we'll say, checklist for PeopleSoft security, and just as a quick reference guide there. So look forward to receiving both those in the mail. The presentation here today is PeopleSoft, labeled PeopleSoft Database Security, and I just would like to foreshadow at least one question that's going to be coming up. This deck was put together with the assumption that we would be speaking to and researching Oracle as a database platform, and we can speak more potentially in the Q&A session with regard to SQL Server and other database platforms. So the agenda here, wanted to lay out some concepts with regard to PeopleSoft and the database, supporting database and security across both. Then I want to just not take a lot of time, but just put a fence around some specific risks with regard to Oracle and attacks therein against, and then really spend the majority of the conversation here today with what you should be doing. The database security program, that's what I was laying out as far as I wanted to leave that in. Probably won't get to that here today. Phil will be, as you said, monitoring the question queue here within the GoToWebinar, as well as our email, and so we'll collect those and certainly look forward to having some discussion at the end. So this is an educational webinar, but just one slide here, who we are if you're not familiar with Integrigy. We have two primary lines of business. Integrigy has been in business since 2001, and the focus is really on enterprise security. So with regard to databases, the enterprise suite here is for enterprise databases as far as Oracle, SQL Server, Sybase, MySQL DB2, and then the major ERP platforms, EBS, PeopleSoft, SAP. And the two lines of business are complementary. Much of what we find in the wild, per se, in our assessment services and working with clients on design and how to help meet SOX or HIPAA or PCI compliance, we like to package up, at least for our auditing tools within our platforms, our commercial platforms as far as App Sentry, and then App Defend being a ERP application firewall. So kind of that's who we are in a nutshell. So I will be speaking to you much here today with what we have found not only in the wild, working with clients per se, but much in our research on the assessment side here with regard to PeopleSoft and database security. So PeopleSoft, similar to, I would say, Oracle or even SAP as far as what it is, how it's built, and how it uses a database, there's really two primary portions. We have the application itself, which you can see, we'll say, highlighted on the left there in blue. We have the database in the middle, and then we have some of the key accounts here that we'll probably be talking about in much more detail here shortly as far as the Connect ID, PSID, and SysADM. First question, does PeopleSoft protect and secure the database? And at a high level, the answer is no. And to be fair to PeopleSoft, I would argue that, the same applies to SAP, if not also Oracle, in that when the vendor builds the application and allows, for transactions to start processing, there's a certain set of assumptions, but each environment is different. So really what we're going to be talking about here today is, again, per the title here, is the topic here is, today's focus is the database and security therein. There's a whole set of other presentations that I would encourage you all to keep an eye out for if you're so interested, that we'll be diving into the application security with PeopleSoft. So whether it's PeopleSoft, whether it's SAP, whether it's EBS or any large software application, this is a slide we really like to start with on most of our conversations with clients, in that over time there is a challenge to maintain the initial levels of security. You can kind of see here the sine wave or the surf wave rolling in that there's a concept of an initial install as you go through the build phase or the first go live, right? Maybe that is the point at which it is hardened and it's patched and everything has been tested. But what happens over time is there's various pressures that are exerted on the system that security deteriorates. And some of this could be just finding downtime to apply security patches, whether those security patches are to the application itself, to the operating system, to the database. The concept of working with all of the end users to find downtime to apply the patch, as well as sometimes sometimes harder to do, is finding testing cycles and getting users actually to test patches prior to applying them to production. So this is a challenge. So if you are sitting on an older or more mature, you've been running PeopleSoft for 10 years or so, this probably resonates very true into what you are experiencing here today. And just in a different way, the same picture here, and going back to some of the other initial comments, was that the idea that when the vendor thinks about the functionality that they're going to then design and build, they have a certain set of assumptions in mind. They then code that, deliver it to you, and your environment, though, is really what is making the security challenge that we need to think about here today, because it is all of the different points of the compass here. Every database connection is a security risk. So we need to think about not just how DBAs or support personnel could be coming in with trusted accounts or whether or not they have named users, but all the interfaces, reporting solutions, batch processing, management tools. Each and every single one of these touch points that is connecting to the database is a security challenge. So some opening level comments there as far as what we're thinking about the database and the application holistically here. Let's now break down some specific risks with regard to database attacks, maybe some things you're aware of, maybe some things you would like to know a little bit more about. But we all hear in the news with regard to various hacks that make the front page of the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, as far as organized crime, advanced persistent threats, APTs, anonymous, Legion of Doom. These organizations are not, we'll say, in my mind, I don't think of this as the James Bond Hollywood movie type villains. You could call them what you want, but they're highly motivated, and they have a lot of resources, and they are thinking about how to either monetize their investments of time as far as information that they can resell, or it could be more political in motivation. Thinking a little bit more about what is your data worth, why would these organizations be interested in you? Why would they be interested in attacking your database? Well, first and foremost, they're interested in information they can easily, we'll say, sell. So we could debate as far as what things are worth, as far as whether or not a first and last name and a social security number, or maybe just the last four of the social security number is worth $30 or $10. The fact of the matter is this information is valuable. This information is valuable even if they're just getting fragments of information. They might be looking to harvest and overlay information with whatever the other means they're doing. If they get into this database, your database, maybe they're going to either sell this to some Eastern market identity fraud equivalent of identity fraud, Amazon.com, or they are looking to use this information for social engineering for other exploits. But the fact of the matter is the information is valuable. And there are tools out there that are specifically written to exploit database vulnerabilities. These tools are used by both the good guys and the bad guys. They're mature, they're free, and they really have, we'll say, commoditized, if not munitionized, these vulnerabilities, in that if I am using some sort of a network attack vulnerability tool and I get some sort of a bridgehead inside your network, these tools are at the point where they don't necessarily need to be an Oracle DBA or even know much about Oracle, as long as they have enumerated and discovered that there's an Oracle instance on your, or a SQL Server instance in your network. They can almost click a button and throw a number of attacks, vulnerabilities to seek to gain control over that database. So two well-known tools out there are Metasploit and the Oracle attack tool. In our assessment services, we use both of these, but albeit in a white hat good guy fashion. And just to kind of underscore maybe an obvious point there, that the older and we'll say also unpatched versions of your database are probably much more vulnerable than the newer versions. There are all sorts of different versions of Metasploit and the Oracle attack tool, but just safe to say that there are tools out here. If you have not thought about it, or you're a little bit curious, I would encourage you just to, after the presentation here, to Google and look into those a little bit more, because they are quite powerful. So how would somebody sit down and think about using these tools? Well, there's passive and active. We could, and there are numerous presentations. We've certainly given them on the whole attack kill chain, so to speak, as far as gaining a threshold, taking an inventory, identifying information of value, and then exfiltrating that out. But certainly when somebody's thinking about a database and attacking the database, they're going to want to know, one, are there databases? Two, what types of databases they are, and how to potentially start connecting to them. So if you think about how an Oracle database works, the WOW, there's some default ports, right, that in tools such as Nmap would usually identify, hey, wait a minute, there's ports talking 1521, that usually identifies an Oracle instance. Nmap can be noisy, so to speak, as far as if you're trying to stay under the radar of any monitoring tools. But think about also just what could be laying out there in file systems as far as copies, network diagrams, copies of TNS.ORA files, and the proverbial, you got the castle wall, and the castle wall might be high and wide, but if there's no defense on the inside, once somebody's got on the inside, these are things that they're going to start looking for, right? They're going to start looking for documentation. They're looking for the yellow brick road, or that's going to lead them to the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, so to speak. Some things that we find in our assessment, and I just got 3 examples here, something easy, something moderately complex, and maybe something much more complex as far as a vulnerability to exploit. But first and foremost, it does not matter whether or not we're talking about PeopleSoft or Oracle or any database platform itself. Default passwords. And so here's some examples that we commonly, I think we trued this up within the last few months, because it's just shocking how it doesn't change over time. As far as when we do an assessment, the default out-of-the-box accounts, the accounts created by the install of the Oracle database itself, being left open and with a default password. So accounts such as DBSNMP or CTXSys being there, being able to easily log on to the database. The attack tools that I mentioned, Metasploit, the Oracle attack tools, they know the exploits have been written. They actually will go through, and you can see they have whole catalogs, and they try to connect to these accounts. And they try to do things such as connecting to these accounts with passwords the same as the username, right? So this is something, we'll say this is the stupid stuff that can trip you up. It is something that if you know that you hear today, I would, hopefully you'll listen to the end of the presentation here, but if you have default passwords in your instance and you know they haven't been cycled recently, please change them. It's something you could do today. Hopefully there's nothing hard-coded in your customizations elsewhere, but these are things that we find and need to be certainly looked at. Something of moderate complexity, just as an example, when you think about database security, specifically within ERP platforms that have these webs of connections amongst databases, are database links. So database links within Oracle, think of these as one-way pipes where one database can throw a query against another database. And if you have these pipes ingressing or egressing from your production database, that can be a risk. And usually what we're finding here is that organizations have these complex webs. Sometimes you have non-prods being able to query or affect change in production databases, vice versa. And sometimes these links are granted to public and or overprivileged, or use overprivileged accounts, and we could sweep a lot of this under the either ignorance or oversight, but is something that we commonly will sit down and talk with people about as far as the use of database links. Something a little bit more as far as database vulnerabilities. Again, 3 examples you might not be thinking about that could be placing your database at risk, but is certainly with regard to Oracle is TNS poisoning. This is a little bit harder of a vulnerability to exploit. It takes some knowledge of Oracle. It is in a very high level. It's just a man-in-the-middle attack that allows you to intercept traffic. All versions of Oracle are affected. There's some default out-of-the-box workarounds, so to speak, that when you do a clean install of 11.204 or 12c, VNCR is enabled. If you've done an upgrade or you're coming off of some of the earlier versions of 11.2 or 11.1, you very well might have an issue here. If you think you do, I can certainly point you to some notes after the webinar here to help with that. And here's just a breakdown of that TNS poisoning and the versions of Oracle and the options thereof. What should you be doing here? Just as far as a time check here, I want to make sure that we have some time to spend on what I'd like to talk with you about. So traditional database security approaches are checklist. If you think about a database, I use the analogy of a 747 or a space shuttle. These large enterprise databases, certainly Oracle, are very complex. There's an almost, we'll say thousands or maybe approaching an infinite number of permutations of different parameter settings, combination of settings that are really built to support many different types of applications, and to do so in a high availability, highly secure manner. The challenge as you go through time and as you go through supporting applications that are very large themselves and are supporting, we'll say, the beating heart of an organization, such as what an ERP platform I like to think of is pumping information around. The These checklists, such as which are I freely recommend a lot, is, for example, the U.S. Department of Defense has a DISA-STIG, which is a checklist for Oracle. They have for SQL Server. These checklists are great starting points. However, they're often in conflict with the core configuration. You go through, you apply the checklist, and you could say, hey, well, my database is now secured to a military specification, and probably the first thing you will notice is that you can't log in because the hardening guide will break your app. While it's a great compass heading, while it is something good to read, you really need to take a couple steps back, think about your security risk, and then think about what parts of these standards could help. The CIS standard for Oracle is also something else as well. Put the URL in there. If you haven't heard of the DISA-STIG, definitely it's worth a cut, copy, paste out of the deck here and put some eyes on it. But going back to the last bullet point here to what I was referring to in that first slide there, talking about the database degrading over time, security degrading over time, is that whatever secure posture you have it, whether at the beginning of time or something that you did a hardening exercise last week or last year, over time configurations drift. They drift because of patches and configurations may be coming in from the database vendor or the application itself, or even your own staff with pushing performance tuning changes and or customizations into your environment. So let's drill into and talk to now about some specifics with regard to PeopleSoft. So PeopleSoft and People Tools, when I think of PeopleSoft, I think of People Tools. And I think of the People Tools being what is used to build out the solutions for finance, for HR, for the student information system. So the version of PeopleSoft that you are on in relation to the database is very important. Oracle has the concept of critical patch updates, the security patches. Oracle has a set. They've been doing this since early 2003 or late 2004. I was actually on the customer advisory board for Oracle for security back when we were first debating as to, with Oracle, what information to share and when and how. But the train stops 4 times a year, and you need to think about what version of PeopleSoft, what version of the database are you on, because it's not just being on a supported version of the database and/or PeopleSoft, but you want to be something that is certified in such a way that is compatible one with the other. Do you need to apply both PeopleSoft, People Tools, and database CPU patches? The answer is yes. Is database security much more than applying CPUs? And the answer also is yes to that. So if the only thing that you are doing is just applying security patches, I would argue you're diluting many efforts that you should be spending elsewhere, and maybe you're not as secure, maybe you're not secure at all, if that is the only thing you are doing. But the fact of the matter here is, if you think about your 52-week maintenance plan, maybe you like working every weekend, but if you do have a maintenance schedule that you've worked out, downtime with your clients, with your customers ahead of time, think about staying on the Yellow Brick Road. Think about stopping the train and taking these patches to stay with those green check marks. As far as supported versions of the database, 12.101's got a little bit more life in it, but 12.104 or 12.102 would be certainly the recommendations of database versions of Oracle to be on. So the number one security recommendation we can make for PeopleSoft is to limit direct database access whenever possible. If you cannot connect to the database, it is much harder to attack it. Firewalls, TNS, invited nodes, connection manager, all of these tools need to be considered. I also highly recommend that DBAs come into the database through a Bastion host rather than and be able to funnel or through network segmentation connectivity in that way, such that maybe that not every network port in every conference room in your organization is able to physically connect to the database, right? So think about, number one, limiting direct database access. Some other things you want to think about, apply the CPU patches. In particular, this is one note that I put in with regard to the presentation last month in Vegas, is the October 2014 PeopleTools CPU needs to be applied. The specific risk here is that the handshake, the logon that PeopleSoft end users use to gain access to the database, that Connect ID is used first, and that Connect ID is then through the secret handshake, so to speak, is throwing some queries around to get the access ID. And the access ID, as we all know, has access to all the information in the PeopleSoft database, social security numbers, anything and everything. The script to decrypt the access password. So if you give me the Connect ID, and we all know that the people with the default password of people is the common default password, again, well known and probably baked into many different attack tools. If I have physical access, I can get, and I have and I issue queries against the table PS access PRFL. I then see the encrypted version of the access ID password, and the only thing I need to do is easily Google the script to download it, and download the script to decrypt that, and I would then own that database and pretty much have access to anything. So if you haven't applied the CPU changes there I put in, you want to be above that, as far as you want to be above 8524 or 8553, because what happens is that the encryption solution has been changed. Some other things to think about with regard to PeopleSoft specific is that you need to think about the database passwords that PeopleSoft creates, right? So the Connect ID, the Access ID, the integration broker, the PS account. Don't use the defaults. Don't use people. Never use passwords the same as the username, and don't share the same password amongst the Connect ID, Access ID, PeopleSoft, integration broker, etc. Those should be separate. Something else I've seen in PeopleSoft assessments is the default Oracle table space, certainly for the Connect ID, should never be system. System is one of the god users of the database, and you just need to only sys and system should be set to use the default table space. Various places within we'll say the PeopleSoft tech stack, not only just especially within configuration files on the middle tier, or even on some desktop tools, is thinking about using the PS admin utility in such a way to make sure that the sysadmin password is always encrypted. If you're leaving that out, if somebody's in your network, they know you're running PeopleSoft, they know a couple things about PeopleSoft, they know that they can exploit some of these tools, they will be looking for those config files, and you're just giving the database to the attackers if you don't encrypt that, right? Something else that, and we'll come back to this in a couple slides deeper in, as far as enabling of monitoring. So enable DB monitoring, set in the app server config file, that I always recommend should be on within Oracle, because that populates the client info, which is then highly useful for auditing. Some other things with regard to PeopleSoft here is that on the production instance, do not install any demo databases. Keep production clean for production, right? The proper use of the PS default tablespace, you should reserve that for application use only. So if you're creating named user accounts, don't recycle that. And I would also argue, think about use of SysADM for day-to-day support versus people doing support. So as much as possible, named user accounts allows for a chain of accountability, right? Try to only or set policy to use accounts properly. Public grants, Wish I had a little bit more time to break down the risks there in or about, but any user of the database has access to anything that's been granted to public, right? So you need to be careful as to anything that's granted to public is basically freely available to anybody. The first slides I put up there, I was today's discussion is highlighted in red as the database, and what was in blue was Tuxedo and Jolt and the other parts of the PeopleSoft tech stack. I did put in a couple slides just to highlight, yes, there's some things you want to at least think about there as far as application accounts. PeopleSoft has a lot of out-of-the-box end user accounts. You need to think about default passwords with them. You want to think about the authorization, what menus and roles as far as administrator and web profile, people that can change core configurations, and then making sure that you have auditing enabled. And then there is, as I said, there's probably a whole set of presentations that we could give and will be giving with regard to Jolt integration broker, web portal, and use of PS key, rotating the password there, and making sure that your template files with all the passwords for all the just different parts of the webs of your tech stack are secure there too. And not but least securing WebLogic itself. So let's go back to talking a little bit more about things you should be doing for PeopleSoft. So insiders are not just administrators, not just developers, but I would argue is that an insider is anybody who has access to these core passwords. An insider would be anybody who has access to your sysadm password, right? So think about making sure that you have segregation between prod and non-prod. Rotate your passwords regularly. Use a password safe. If you don't have any money in your budget for a commercial tool such as CyberArk, there's a lot of decent open source out there. If you are just using a spreadsheet, again, it's not secure. It's not really auditable. If you've spent the money on and spending the money to maintain PeopleSoft, I would argue that you should protect your investment. Invest in a password safe. Think about some of the tools that Oracle gives you too, as far as checking or assessing the risk for use of default or easy-to-guess passwords. There's a view that Oracle provides, DBA users with a default password. It's useful, albeit our tools actually look much deeper, right? So in our tools that we have, App Sentry, as I was mentioning there in one of the slides, I think the rainbow table there is well over 1 million passwords where we're checking password hashes for database accounts. Something else that you should be doing with regard to PeopleSoft is to use database profiles. So a database profile within an Oracle profiles within Oracle databases allow you to set groups, or allow you to define groups of different types of users, and each one of these groups can have a different password complexity setting, right? And you can actually enforce the passwords just like you do on Active Directory, that if you try to set the password to welcome 123, it says no, you need so many special characters and you can't use the one you used last time, right? So out of the box, Oracle does not do this. Certainly the default install of Oracle with PeopleSoft doesn't do this. We always recommend that you should, right? So set up thinking about there should be a profile for the accounts that the database uses. There should be a profile for the PeopleSoft accounts, and there should be another profile for any named users. And you can see here the suggestion that we're laying out is that the grace time, the lock, the complexity should be different because there's different risk profiles here. This just gives another example that once you have those profiles in place, these are things that you would then be looking for as far as deviation. Are people using them, and then any changes to them. Auditing. Many times, certainly when you're thinking about an ERP platform, that auditing has been foisted on an organization maybe for a compliance reason, and that it's often, we find, the requirements are poorly defined, and little value to the organization is being actually generated other than being able to state that it's on. So think about, and this slide here helps you to think about that Oracle has various levels of auditing. Certainly what we're going to be talking to is standard auditing here, and we're talking about moving those audit trails out and thinking about creating audit information that's of value. And all right, went too far. The challenge that we want to lay out for ourselves is thinking about auditing in such a way that we can consolidate it in a centralized logging facility. We highly recommend tools such as Splunk or ArcSight that can, or Logarithm, that is a centralized repository that provides that separation of duties between, let's say, the DBAs and that the system administrators, and that the log data, the audit data, the integrity of it can be protected, right? And so the thinking about, and we have a white paper here up on it, highlighted at the bottom there, that lays this out in much more detail as far as, rather than stovepiping and thinking of HIPAA and FISMA and PCI separately, think about it in a consistent lens here through a set of foundation events that we've developed in our research, and then you could pull through database as well as PeopleSoft configurations to pull that together. So a sample of the methodology, and here's the common, we'll say, lens as far as our events, as far as the rows and the columns, as far as the compliance. There's more standards. They don't all fit on the screen here. We've done more than that, and in our research, what we've helped people with as far as how to specifically go in and turn on, or the specific the audit configurations at the database, as well as within the application to meet each one of these cells, so to speak. So one of the things I mentioned earlier was enable DB monitoring within the PeopleSoft App Server config file. We always recommend that that's turned on, especially with an Oracle database, such that you can do this. We want to, when we get into the Oracle standard auditing functionality that you get for free with the enterprise license of Oracle, is that we want to be able to look into that client info field that is populated, we'll say, automatically or automagically when enable DB monitoring is enabled, that you can actually, from the database, know what PeopleSoft end user, in this case Jack, what Jack was doing, right? Because if you just look at the database auditing, you just see that SysADM did something. What you want to know, did Mike do it, did Fred do it, or did Jack do it? And this, by setting this to on, allows you to know who did it. And this, as you can see, as you start pulling this thread through your auditing solution, that you could start triangulating, building some very nice correlation models inside of Logarithm or Splunk as far as who's doing what when. Auditing really, we usually say is it's not that it's trivial to design and turn on, but it's all 80% or more. It's all in the monitoring, the day over day. And you want to think about the auditing that you're enabling within the database, within the application itself, is how is that being used, and is it creating value? So if you can push that in the tools that you can use, great. Encryption. Many times we'll get the call, hey, we're running PeopleSoft, we need some help with encryption. So from a database perspective, and I think I'll talk about encryption here, then I'll talk briefly about Oracle Data Vault, and then I'll take some questions. But the point I'd like to make is that we're familiar with data at rest, data in use, and data in motion. And there's some misconceptions about certainly PeopleSoft and database encryption, in that encryption is not an access control tool. The way it works, the way Oracle works, the WOW, is that when the database is opened, at least Oracle TDE, the way it works is that anybody who's using the database, anything that's encrypted is in clear text within the system global area. What the encryption is doing first and foremost is pretty much just encrypting the data files at rest, such that if anybody physically steals the storage array, you're protected. So in many cases, if you ask people, well, how is your data center protected? And they say, yeah, there's a lot of guys with guns and angry dogs. Okay, do you need to really worry about that, or are you doing the encryption at the database level just because somebody, from legal counsel says, okay, the standard says encrypt it, and that's why you're doing it. And that's a very valid reason why, but I would note that just encrypting files at a data file level within the operating system that happen to be database files is not really giving you a fine-grained access control. It's certainly not blinding the DBAs because it's encrypted. You're not blinding them from sensitive data. PeopleSoft itself does offer some tools, and for encryption, I just want to splash some notes out there with regard to that. PeopleSoft is certainly well certified with regard to TDE at the column level and at the table space level. There's some notes there. Does TDE or Oracle, does PeopleSoft with TDE meet various requirements? For example, if you're in California and need to abide by SB 1386 or the PCI if you're a university and you're processing student credit card transactions, I would sit down first and foremost and have a conversation with your do you own the Oracle licenses for advanced security option? And then if you do, then it's probably a quick conversation with your DBAs as far as some high level of effort. But then before you do anything, sit down with your legal department and really work through why would you be going through and implementing TDE? What is it really giving you? Because it might be that if the requirement for security, and security is different than compliance, is that you should be considering a different tool, or maybe a tool along with TDE, you should be thinking about Oracle Data Vault. So yes, this slide quick here, PeopleTools 846, certified. Probably everybody on the phone here is working on using a version of PeopleSoft that is certified TDE, some other links there. So Oracle Database Vault. This is the tool that Oracle has written to blind the DBAs. At a very high level, a very simplistic explanation, that's how I like to lay it out. It's rule-driven. You can enforce these rules at a very low level, and in fact, it's at a low level. I would say it's deep down at the bottom of the database kernel, right? If not impossible to circumvent. And this is really, again, the tool that Oracle's purpose-built to really enforce a level of segregation and to define, we'll say, behaviors that are less risky. So let's use a visual to look at this. As far as I have a DBA who wants to do an alter system, or maybe just the DBA that's joyriding that wants to go in and do a select star against the salary table to see how much people are making. This is the tool that allows the DBA to do certain things, but maybe they're blocked according to the time of day, or maybe they just can't see or can't issue select statements against certain tables. I think the next slide here kind of goes into a little bit more detail. Sorry for those people who are maybe not as technical as other, but the database vault, when you install it, when you install it with PeopleSoft, it actually creates a new database account on the PeopleSoft DBA account. And this is the account that Oracle recommends that you use for the day-to-day operations, because this account is not able to issue select statements against core PeopleSoft tables. And I think this slide here will help bring it all together as far as what it is we're talking about. So if you install PeopleSoft as is today, right, you have what's in green there. You have the access ID, the SysADM. When you install Oracle Database Vault, you get the PeopleSoft DBA account. And you can see there the column in blue there as far as a select command rule that this PeopleSoft DBA account literally cannot issue select statements against the SysADM schema. And you could say, well, wait a minute. If you're just blinding them to selection, they can still do updates or call procedures and do other things. Is that really making it secure? It might help with your general counsel or legal or compliance opinion, but maybe you want to lock that down a little bit more. And certainly the auditing that I would argue, the auditing the database vault offers is as far as not just the violations, but also the success also helps enrich the audit stream to really build out a much more robust solution. Database Vault, it's a great tool, right? It's a great tool to really, I would highly recommend considering it with PeopleSoft, and I would highly recommend not just stopping there, but thinking about expanding out how with your in integrating the Audit Vault events in with your hopefully your enterprise auditing solution to supplement and enrich the audit stream coming out of the database. Just kind of quick here because I have some questions I know that we'll want to get to, but things that you can do with regard to Audit Vault and setting up, whether rules that not just look at network segments, right, as far as, points of the compass, traffic coming from specific servers, either rejected or accepted, but not also whitelisting programs, use of Toad, use of SQL Developer, on up into specific OS user accounts that are blocked or accepted. So it's a very useful tool. Again, if you're looking to build a secure environment, definitely think about data at rest, data in use, and maybe you need to think about database vault as well as TDE as well. I'm going to leave this slide here, and I'm just going to kind of start here, and we're going to just go through the end. But we did want to lay out, and we did cover this in the presentation at Collaborate as far as the database security program and how that could be looked at. Here's some contact information.